Welcome back to Echo of Truth True Crime. Let's have a look at the Lindsay Clancy trial. People have different opinions on Patrick. What happened on January 24, 2023? Lindsay Clancy and Patrick Clancy lived in Duxbury, Massachusetts, with their 3 children, Cora age 5, Dawson age 3, Callan age 8 months. Lindsay was a labor and delivery nurse. Patrick worked in software. On January 24th, Lindsay had been dealing with serious mental health problems in the period leading up to the killings. The defense now argues that she was experiencing postpartum psychosis and/or another severe psychiatric condition, aggravated by medication. The prosecution argues that she deliberately killed the children and understood what she was doing. That distinction is crucial. Lindsay has not disputed that she killed the children. Her defense is essentially that she was not criminally responsible because of her mental state. The basic timeline that isn't really disputed. This is where Patrick's story becomes important, because there is considerable electronic/video evidence surrounding his movements. Around 4:53 to 5 p.m., according to the prosecution's timeline, Lindsay contacted Patrick while he was working in his basement office. She suggested getting takeout from 3V in Plymouth. The prosecution characterized this as somewhat unusual, because the family generally ordered from places closer to their home. Lindsay eventually ordered the food herself. Around 5:15 p.m., Lindsay texted Patrick, Pedialyx liquid stool softener. She was asking him to pick up medication. Patrick then left the house to get the medication and food. This is important, because the prosecution's theory is that sending Patrick out of the house gave Lindsay the opportunity to kill the children without him there. 5:32 p.m. CVS. Surveillance footage places Patrick at a CVS in Kingston at approximately 5:32 p.m. He went into the medication area. At approximately 5:33 p.m., he called Lindsay. She didn't answer initially. She called him back approximately 1 minute later. They spoke for roughly 14 seconds about which medication to buy. Patrick later testified that Lindsay sounded quiet and as though she was busy. He said he assumed she might have been giving the children baths or doing something similar. That telephone call is important because it is one piece of evidence suggesting that, from Patrick's perspective, Lindsay sounded sufficiently normal to communicate about the medication. Please join me for part 2. This has been Echo of Truth True Crime. Please leave a comment, follow and subscribe. Welcome back to part 2. The first thing people are questioning about Patrick's timeline. This is one of the areas where we need to be extremely precise. People online have pointed out. Patrick said he left around 5:15. CVS was only about 3 minutes away. Yet the surveillance footage doesn't show him entering CVS until approximately 5:32. That's roughly a 14-minute gap. Some people therefore say, where was Patrick between 5:15 and 5:32? That is a legitimate timeline question to examine, but it is not presently proof that Patrick did something criminal. There could be ordinary explanations involving the exact time he left, getting into the vehicle, driving, parking, entering the store, etc. And importantly, the prosecution itself has the surveillance evidence. The publicly reported evidence establishes that he was at CVS at 5:32, so I would label this fact. Patrick said he left around 5:15 and surveillance placed him at CVS around 5:32. Question: what exactly accounts for every minute between leaving the house and entering CVS? Not established. That he returned to the house, harmed anyone, or otherwise committed a crime during that period. That's the distinction I want to maintain throughout this investigation. Patrick's trip to the restaurant. After CVS, Patrick went to 3V in Plymouth. Surveillance/electronic evidence placed him there at approximately 5:54 p.m. He picked up the food and left. He then drove home. The publicly reported timeline puts his arrival at approximately 6:09 p.m. So the broad sequence is house, CVS, restaurant, house. And there is surveillance evidence supporting significant portions of that route. What happened when Patrick got home? Patrick testified that the house was unusually quiet. He called for Lindsay. There was no response. He went upstairs. The bedroom door was locked. He eventually got inside and saw blood and an open window. He went outside and found Lindsay seriously injured on the ground. She had survived what prosecutors describe as an apparent suicide attempt involving injuries and a fall from the second-story window. Patrick called 911. During the emergency response, he asked where the children were. According to the testimony and previously reported investigative evidence, Lindsay indicated that they were in the basement. Patrick then went downstairs. That's where he found the children. The 911 call is extremely important. The jury has now heard Patrick's 911 call. It is not merely Patrick telling a story years later. The jury heard his actual emergency call from that night. Police testimony also described Patrick screaming after discovering the children. One officer testified that he heard Patrick yelling, "She killed the kids." That is evidence the prosecution can use to show Patrick's immediate reaction upon discovering what had happened. It does not, by itself, prove exactly what happened before the call. But it is important because it gives investigators a contemporaneous record, rather than simply relying upon Patrick's later recollection. The children's deaths. The prosecution says Lindsay strangled all 3 children with exercise bands. Cora and Dawson died at the house. Callan was transported to a hospital but ultimately died as well. Lindsay then survived her own suicide attempt but suffered catastrophic injuries and is now paralyzed. Those underlying physical events are not really the central dispute at trial. The enormous legal question is, what was happening inside Lindsay's mind when she killed them? The defense says severe postpartum psychosis/mental illness. The prosecution says deliberate murder. Where Patrick becomes much more interesting. Patrick isn't simply a grieving father giving testimony against Lindsay. He is actually broadly supportive of Lindsay's defense. He has said that he forgives her. He has described her mental health deterioration. And he has testified about things that could actually help the defense. For example, Patrick testified that Lindsay had talked about suicidal thoughts and intrusive thoughts involving the children. He also testified that her condition appeared to deteriorate. Please like for part 3.